On this episode, we look at crosswalk improvements in Salem, Oregon. Then we drop in on a conference on obesity and the built environment. The American Planning Association meets in Washington, D.C. The Society for Photographic Education meets in Newport, Rhode Island. Finally, we talk with a consultant about the nature of safety. Stay tuned. We're in Salem, Oregon, talking with Rick Barnes, who's a project engineer with the city. What's important about this intersection behind us?
What we have here is an intersection where the pedestrians are trying to cross over 6 lanes of traffic, and there's a huge draw with Riverfront Park on the west side and then our Salem downtown on the east side. So we get a huge amount of pedestrians coming through here and a sea of asphalt for them to cross in between.
You've been working on some plans for this intersection. What are you going to do to improve things?
What we're going to do here is we're going to segregate the crosswalks as far as splitting how far they have to go in each phase. In the middle, where there is an existing median now, we will build a covered structure for pedestrians to cross to half of the intersection at a time. And then on the west side of the intersection, we're actually going to combine the 2 crosswalks into a single 20-foot wide crosswalk so that it's a lot more easier to notice for the drivers when they're coming down through here at high speeds, and they'll be able to recognize this is an area that they want to slow down through when they come in here.
What are the benefits going to be for the pedestrians, and what are the benefits going to be for the drivers for this kind of change?
Well, this is kind of a unique situation in where we'll be able to benefit both, in that we'll be able to shorten the amount of time that we have to give to the pedestrians to cross the intersection, which will allow us to increase the amount of green time for the drivers. So it'll be a win-win situation for both of them.
You've got another intersection down here a block you're also planning changes for. What are you going to do there?
We're doing something similar at intersection of State Street, where we are again going to allow the pedestrians to cross half of the intersection at the time into a crossing scenario, a Z crossing, to where pedestrians will actually be facing the oncoming traffic. And so it'll make it a lot easier for pedestrians to make eye contact with anybody coming up and to be visible to the driver as well when they go through the intersection.
We're in Washington, D.C., talking with Alan Deary with the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. What is the institute?
We're part of the National Institutes of Health. We're one of the funding agencies that help support biomedical research across the country, and we have a particular focus on environment and how it's related to human health. So we help to study the interaction of environmental agents, from pesticides to allergens to issues related to the built environment and social environment, and how that interaction influences human health status.
Speaking of built environment, what's the conference you have going on this week?
We're having a 3-day meeting on obesity and the built environment. What are the interconnections between built environment and the epidemic we have in the country in overweight and obesity? And in particular, we're looking at issues such as nutrition, physical activity, behavior and lifestyle choices, how all those are influenced by environmental parameters and how they contribute then to overweight and obesity, as well as what we can do to try to develop interventions, better means of prevention to try to reduce that extent of overweight.
When you talk about an epidemic of overweight and obesity, how bad is it?
In the U.S. right now, among adults, 2 out of 3 of us are overweight or obese. And really the percentage of obesity in this country is 30%. Among kids, it's 15% of children from 6 to 19 years of age are overweight or obese. And if those trends continue as they are now, simply by the year 2008, in 4 years, 3 out of 4 of us will be overweight or obese. So it really is at epidemic proportions, and it's a phenomenon that's really just been triggered in the last 30 years. And part of that really does then serve to indicate that it's mostly due to environmental influences, that it's not genetic origin, for example, because our genes don't really evolve or adapt in such a short span of time. So it's really these types of outside influences in our environment that we believe are mostly responsible for that.
Now, what are the health implications? I mean, why should we care if people are getting heavier?
Right. Obesity is not just the problem in itself, although it is an issue in a lot of ways, but it leads to a number of larger health conditions. It's a precursor for cardiovascular disease, for many types of cancer, for osteoarthritis. It has a number of psychological manifestations associated with it. So it really does act as a harbinger that leads to other types of health conditions later in life.
Built environment. What has the research shown that's important in the built environment in determining weight?
There are some hints, I would say, some beginning pieces of evidence to suggest that there are connections between built environment and overweight and obesity. Some of that indicates that people who live in communities that have more sparse development, which is sometimes characterized by the term sprawl, actually have higher BMIs, body mass index, higher levels of body fat, and that is a precursor in those cases to higher levels of cardiovascular disease compared to people who live in communities that are more dense or more compact.
And are people looking at what we need to know as well as what we already know? What's been the discussion going on?
So the discussion here is very interdisciplinary. It involves biomedical scientists, epidemiologists, but also a large group of land use planners, urban designers, architects, developers, to try to find that interface between built environment and public health. So we're looking at that whole range in terms of the evidence base that we have now to help us better understand the causes of how this increase in obesity came about, as well as what we can do to help design a future research agenda. What are the steps, the directions we would head in next to really be able to better understand that and to develop intervention techniques to try to start to reduce or alleviate those harmful health effects due to obesity.
We're in Washington, D.C., talking with Mary Kay Peck, who's president of the American Planning Association. What is the APA?
The APA is the educational association that consists of 34,000 people who are advocates for building better communities.
And what's been going on here in Washington the last few days?
This is our annual conference. We've had 5,200 people here to sharpen their professional skills and to share their knowledge.
And the number 25 has been talked about a lot this week. What's the significance of that?
The number 25 means that we're celebrating 25 years of the American Planning Association. We've had professional planning associations before that, but this marks the consolidation of two of our predecessors. So this is 25 years of making better communities happen.
The history of planning as a formal profession goes back well before the 25 years. What was the status of the planning profession over the course of the 20th century?
Well, some of the planning principles have come out of public safety issues, for example, making sure that we have adequate light, water, and air. But many of them also came out of the City Beautiful movement, which was around the turn of the 19th century and was really capped off by the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, and focused more on civic buildings and parks and open space and those kinds of things.
How has the planning profession changed since those early days?
Well, we've developed our own specialty of city planning, and in the past, our roots are in landscape architecture and architecture, but in the 20th century, we've developed city planning as a private curriculum.
And one of the things planners do is design the space that pedestrians use. How has the treatment of pedestrians by the planning profession changed over the decades?
Well, I think unfortunately the way that planners want to treat spaces for pedestrians is not entirely, in fact not even largely under our purview. I live in the West, and in the West the decisions about street widths, which impacts how pedestrians are treated ultimately lies with the public safety providers, the police and fire chiefs. And they have an inordinate amount of influence. And so we are building streets that are far too wide for pedestrians. And it's sad because it's safer for pedestrians if cars are going slow on more narrow streets. It presents a sense of neighborhood with the narrow streets. Wide streets keep people from walking across them. So as planners, we have been carrying the banner that says, make those streets more narrow, put in textures, do things so that people feel safe and they'll walk on sidewalks and they'll walk across the street, instead of having our pedestrians at the mercy of cars that are just zooming too fast because the streets are too wide.
We're in Newport, Rhode Island, talking with Sandy Sorleen, who's conference chair for the Society for Photographic Education. What is the Society?
This is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence for 41 years, and we represent photographic educators, photographers, students, critics, curators, and collectors of photography, anyone interested in photography and its future, and how images are used and made and interpreted. And we are advocates for the medium in its broadest sense, visual culture and photographic practice.
What's been going on here in Newport the last few days?
Well, we just had a rockin' conference. You can hear how hoarse my voice is from the great party we finished with last night. This is our annual meeting, our annual national conference, and we have it in a different city every year. Here we've chosen Newport partly because I'm familiar with the area, I love the area, and the conference theme this year is Photography in Place, subtitle Home, Neighborhood, Nation, World, and there are a lot of things about Newport in this area that we can used as talking points about those kinds of issues. So we've had 4 days of presentations, approximately 55 different presentations by photographers and curators and other scholars. And we've had a huge exhibits fair with photographic equipment and publishers with beautiful photographic books. We've had parties and receptions, exhibitions all over Rhode Island, maybe 30 different exhibitions in conjunction with the conference. What else do we have? We have the meeting of the National Board, board meetings for a few days now upcoming. So I'm here for about 10 days. Most of the attendees were here for about 4 days, and we've had a really good time.
How is photography used to represent place? What's behind that theme?
Well, when we received proposals for the conference, we received 158 proposals, which was a record. We really had a great response to this theme and this particular year. We were looking for work. We really wanted the theme broadly applied. So when we think about place and photography in place, it's not just about photographing a place. For instance, it's not just about landscapes or pictures of architecture or outdoor nature pictures, something like that. But we wanted to be able to think about it in terms of an individual's place in their home, their neighborhood, their nation, their world, an individual's sense of identity, perhaps, representations of community, states of mind, in the vernacular, where you're at, that kind of thing. There have been investigations of histories of representations of place. I saw a really good presentation yesterday. I think you saw this one also on the Paradise area of Newport and how different artists, photographers and painters have depicted it over the last century. And I thought that was wonderful to see different artists' interpretation of one very specific place. So that's just an example. But we really had a lot of diversity in the approaches that people took to expressing place.
And one of the speakers you had here was Dan Burden, who's pretty well known in the pedestrian advocacy world. How would you describe his use of photography?
Well, he is using it as an advocacy tool, and I was very excited to invite him and have him accept to come and show us how that can work really effectively. I mean, he's got a tremendous PowerPoint presentation, easily the best, use of that particular medium that I've seen at these conferences. He could teach us a lot about how to present that kind of thing. And images, really, you can describe how a place will look. I mean, what he does is he'll show before and after pictures. He was using the work of Steve Price also, who will take a photograph of a streetscape that has problems. Perhaps, it's an auto-centric wasteland, sort of an area that we're all familiar with, and then he'll digitally enhance it to show how it could look with various improvements to the streetscape, architecturally and with street trees and traffic calming and all the sorts of things that make a street more comfortable for pedestrians. So Dan was showing some of Steve's work. He was showing places that attract people and explaining why people are attracted to those places, what they like to do there, and the types of physical modifications you could make to help that happen. So I felt that the educators who attended that talk were very tuned into hearing about that and can take that to their students perhaps. So I hope that does happen, and Dan was very generous to offer us a CD of that presentation for us to disseminate or put on the website. So I think it'll get out there. It's difficult to sort of cross disciplines here. The attendees are used to seeing a lot of photographic image makers, photographers work, and that's what they're most attracted to. So I was taking a bit of a risk inviting someone from kind of another discipline, a citizen activist like Dan, to address us, to show us these kinds of methods of presentation and issues that we're not necessarily that tuned into here. So I think it'll really help.
We're talking with Ben Hamilton-Baillie of Hamilton-Baillie Associates. What is Hamilton-Baillie Associates?
Hamilton-Baillie Associates is a small group of people who combine urban design principles with good traffic engineering, a new approach to traffic engineering that allows vehicles and traffic movement to interact with people and quality places in new ways.
And this has sometimes been called going beyond traffic calming. How are you escaping the old concept of traffic calming?
Well, it's an approach which doesn't rely on imposing yet further impositions by the state or the highway authority onto the way in which we behave as drivers or as pedestrians or as bicyclists, but uses ways to emphasize the way that drivers read space, the way that roads tell a story, or the way in which humans interact in order to resolve points of conflict or interaction. And so, by contrast with an approach that relied on more pedestrian crossings or speed bumps or speed cameras or narrowings or artificial layers of impedimenta in the street, you strip that out. You basically try and avoid as minimum amount of road markings or signs or guardrails or other methods, so that as a driver or as a pedestrian, you understand the circumstances that you find yourself in. If you come into my living room, I don't need a sign on the wall which says, "Don't spit on the floor." It's perfectly obvious from the context of the room, the way it's arranged, and from years of understanding that has gone into your upbringing, that it's not appropriate to spit on the floor. If we were standing in a saloon bar or in a football stadium, it would be different, and you'd understand that from the context. And what approaches that I'm involved in, and colleagues in other mainland European countries, particularly here in Denmark and in the Netherlands, is using the context and history of place and the richness of urban form to influence the way drivers behave. So when you enter a town, you know it's a town. You know it's different from the freeway or from the main highway. You have very strong gateways and transition spaces. And once in a city or the built environment, you intervene in the interaction between people as little as possible. So if people want, otherwise you find in the olden days people would say, we need more legislation, stronger control of laws, we need to give the police or the state more powers to sort out conflicts. The trouble is that the more you do that, the less capable people become of resolving problems themselves, and you get less safety, not more. So when people come to us and say, here's a scheme for a square or a street or a space, are you allowed to park here? I say, you don't ask me, I don't live here. It's nothing to do with me. You must sort that out yourself. Can I cross the road here? You must take a view on that. So I guess it's turning many of the assumptions about what goes into safety and what goes into traffic engineering on their head, and bringing the principles of good urban design and quality of space together with the principles of traffic engineering into a single discipline. There are approaches to cities which have come from completely different directions, and most traffic engineers and planners have a completely different value set and different approach. Now, whilst they do, we will have cities which are segregated, which are split into a traffic world and a social world. But by combining the principles together, you can achieve better circulation of movement, better vehicle movement, so you get huge benefits for your traffic, your drivers and car movements, combined with safer and certainly higher quality cities.
And the places where this has been tried, how well has it worked? Do they like it enough to try it more?
Well, it seems to, yes. It often is met with disbelief to begin with, that you can make pedestrians safer by removing pedestrian crossings. That's quite a difficult concept to get to grips with. But if you go to cities like Drachten in the north of the Netherlands, or Oosterwolde, or a number of towns and cities in mainland Europe, from Ostend up to, there's very good examples here in Denmark, you'll find that what is achieved is a degree of freer movement and flow and a much higher quality urban space where the skills of human beings interacting are emphasized in ways that many people, after they've seen it for a while, they say, but this is so simple, why didn't we think of this before? If you've ever watched an informal campsite, I don't know, they're more formal in America, but in Europe and Britain, campsites are very informal, just tents and cars and sharing the same field. And there are no rules. You don't need to be told what the speed limit is or don't run over children. It's obvious. Very few people want to kill children. We're lucky in that sense. And you find that there's a universal language that doesn't need signs or what's the law here? Do we need legislation to tell me whether the speed limit is 20 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour? It's obvious from the space. It's perfectly obvious. Indeed, the less you say, what's the space, the better people understand it. So there's still a long way to go, but it's worth having a look at the cities and towns that have begun to experiment with this, because for most cities we are at a stage where conventional traffic calming has reached the end of the road. We're fed up with putting in more speed bumps or barriers to cars or fighting this battle between cars versus people. It's not a battle we can win. Cars are part of our systems in the Western world and will remain so for many years. So understanding that they are part of the same world is an important step. So really that's where my work is. I work with a whole number of highway authorities across the UK, mainly in the west of England, but drawing on research and stealing best ideas from mainly from colleagues here in mainland Europe, but also drawing on parallel thinking that's taking place in the States and in Canada and in Australia. It's an approach which has an important parallel in some very interesting thinking about the nature of safety. Currently, we put huge emphasis on safety in cities, on the safety of children, on road safety, but we have very little working understanding of what safety means. Does it mean the removal of hazards? Well, not necessarily. Hazards can be a very useful way of connecting us with our environment and increasing our relationship with our environment. And until we have an understanding that risk and safety are important parts of learning to cope with our environment, and that traffic engineering, road engineering in particular, is not about the removal of hazards, but about the understanding that if you're going to drive a ton and a half of metal around the city, you have to be able to cope with hazards. Remove hazards, remove pedestrians from the scene, guardrails, underpasses, traffic signals, simply allow a false sense of security to be created, and that leads to danger. And in the UK we kill about 130 children a year on the streets. Perhaps it's not very many, but I think it's 130 too many. Britain has a very good general road safety record. We kill very few people in cars or injure them, but we have a very bad safety record for pedestrians. It's one that's getting worse. The UK government is desperate to improve this position, but lacks a theoretical framework, the tools. It lacks a method for doing this. So I'm interested in this approach because the growing body of evidence from Denmark and from the Netherlands, from Sweden, from countries which have tried this approach, suggests that there's a huge amount of improvements in safety and in quality of life, as well as in improvements in circulation and movement that can be achieved by rethinking the underlying principles of traffic engineering.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.